Hi again, welcome back. We are creating a simple Grails application, and in the previous video we looked at the MySQL table that we want to pull information out of, and what we are going to do right now is we're going to create the our bare bones Grails project. Once we do that, we are then going to set the database connection so we can communicate with our database. We are then going to create what's called a domain class that maps to our table that we want to pull information out of. I like to think of a domain class as representing a row of a table. And then we're going to verify that all this stuff works using a technique called scaffolding. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and let's open up Groovy Grails tool suite. So the Groovy Grails tool suite is an IDE, it's an integrated development environment. It's basically Eclipse, except it's got a few Grails add-ons to it, and it's put out by the folks that actually create Grails. So I'm in here. I've got a few projects already, as you can see, that I've been playing around with. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to New. I'm going to say New Grails Project. I'm going to call my project Super Spritin. And I'd like to use this version. Let's say Finish. Now what this is doing is this is calling the Create Grails app. Normally, well, you could do this from a command line, but since we've got IDEs that can do all the hard work for us, I'd rather use something like Groovy Grails Tool Suite. And if you're curious, I'm using version 3.3.0 of the Groovy Grails tool suite. I'm also, let's see, where is it? It's Windows, Preferences, General, Groovy. In here, I'm also using Groovy Compiler version 2.07. Here's our Super Spritin project that's been created. If I step in here, I can actually go to an application properties file that'll actually show some of this information. So here's my Grails version 2.2.3, and it just has some other information about the project. So here we are. We've got our bare bones Grails project. The first thing that I'm going to do in here, I'm going to go to my comp folder. I'm going to go to build config. Since I'm using a MySQL database, one of the nice things about Grails is that it really has a lot of built-in functionality straight out of the gate for MySQL. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to uncomment this dependencies lines. So now, next time I get ready to run Grails or do a build, Grails will go out, it'll get whatever it needs to access MySQL, including drivers and all that kind of stuff. Just because I commented that out. And let's save here. The next thing I need to do, I need to go to my data source file within the comp folder. And I need to make some updates within here. Right now, all we're trying to do is we're trying to set up our Grails application to connect to our database. Grails comes prepackaged with an internal database called, what is it, H2. I'd like to get rid of that. I'm going to comment this stuff out. And I've already got a few things prepared here. Here we go. So right here, I'm telling Grails, hey, this is the type of database I'd like to connect to. You're going to use, I want to connect to a MySQL database, so you've got to use this MySQL driver. Again, since I uncommented this line out, I don't have to install that driver or anything. Grails will just go out there and grab it. And this right here, I'm telling Grails what type of database dialect I want to use. And I'm also adding this, I want this to be a read-only Grails application. Okay, next up, I need to tell Grails where this database is. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to update this information right here. rid of this guy. Yeah, let me get rid of this guy. So I have MySQL running on my local laptop, and it's running at port 3306. That's where that service is running, and here's my SQL database that I want to connect to, Sterling_MySQL. This right here really should do it. This should allow us to connect to our MySQL database. Now, if you are connecting to an Oracle database, you're going to have the following lines up here. You're going to say, hey, I want to use this JDBC driver for Oracle. JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. And you're going to need to go out to the Oracle's website and download this driver. When you do that, I actually have another project in here where I'm using an Oracle database. When you do that, you'll want to put the driver right here. I put it in my lib folder. And that allowed Grails to say, hey, here's the driver, here's how I can connect to the Oracle database. I also had to add this as in there for the dialect, and then you've also got to add your connect string. And I had an Oracle database on my local laptop that I was connected to called XE, and the Oracle XE service was running at port 1521. So that's how I connected to an Oracle database in that other Grails project. But we're talking about MySQL, so let's move forward from here. So we should be good in regards to connecting to the MySQL database. The next thing we need to do is we need to create our domain class. So let's go to domain. I'm going to right click, I'm going to say new, I'm going to say domain class. As a standard, I'm going to put this domain class into a package. I'm going to say edu.unm, that's my organization, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to put it into the package Zuper Spriten. And I'm going to call my domain class Spriten. So I'm going to click finish. Grails will do some thinking, and it will build my my first domain class in here. So here we go. There's my Spriten.groovy. It's my domain class, and it's just very bare bones. I'm going to grab some information. There we go. Put it in there. So here's what we're looking at. I've got 5 fields from this table that I'm concerned about. I've got PITM, my ID, banner ID, I've got my last name, first name, and I've got another field called change indicator. In here, I've got some constraints. This will determine the field order in which these fields show up if you do default scaffolding. And then I've got mapping. This is where you map your domain class to your table. If this was an Oracle database, and again, the Spriten table comes from the Banner suite of products, and I took the structure of Spriten and moved it into a MySQL database. But if you were connecting to an Oracle database that had Spriten, usually that Spriten table is going to live in Saturn, so this is how you would set up the mapping for the table name. I had a Spriten table in my own local database, and it was in a schema called Sterling Crow. But since we're using MySQL, there's no schema, so I'm just saying table Spriten. I have a version column in here that is normally required by Grails applications. I'm just saying false for this since we're just doing a read-only Grails project. And then I say, hey, my PITM value that I defined up here, I want you to map that to the column called Spriten PITM. I want you to map ID to Spriten ID, last name to Spriten last name, first name to Spriten first name, and change indicator to Spriten change end. So that is what we need to do to map our domain class to our table. Now, I could just do in Groovy Grails tool suite, if you do Control, Alt, Shift, and then G, it'll bring this up, and I can do a run app. And this will bring up, hopefully I won't have any errors, it'll bring up my Grails application, and it'll start, there's a web server that is packaged with the Groovy Grails tool suite that I'm going to use, and it should come up. Oh, I did something wrong. Let's see. Access denied for user at localhost. It didn't like something in my data source. Ouch. So the reason I got that error right here, this at localhost error, is because I'm not giving it any login information. I need to give it some credential information. So the username and the password for the MySQL database on my local laptop is my name. So now I'm going to give it this. Now I'm going to do a run app. Now we should be able to have our Grails application come up, and it should be able to connect to our database. So it's thinking. Okay. And I need a web browser. Here we go. So we're in, but it doesn't do anything. And that's because there's no controller. So all I've done is I've just created a mapping, but I need to also have my application do something. So that's where the controller comes into play. So let's go to controllers, and we're going to right click here. We're going to say new. We're going to say controller. I'm going to use my same convention I used before, super spriden. Now I'm just going to call it spriden because Grails knows to put the word controller at the end. So right now, there's not going to be a whole lot that's going on. What I need to do is I want to make sure that this works correctly, so I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to use our scaffolding technique. Save. Let's see how we did. Where's our... Okay, I click on Sprite Controller, and there we have it. Our application can actually read from the database using that domain class, and the next thing we need to do is we need to actually make our application do something.